The World Cup is obviously just months away from kicking off, and there's a ton that I want to pick your brain about, but I want to start with your new book. So it's called We Are the World Cup, with the word cup being in parentheses there. And there it is. You've written several best selling books, but talk to me a little bit about why you felt compelled to write this one and how it's a special project for you.
Um, the book is many things. It's a narrative of the modern World Cup, a personal narrative as I've lived them. If you read it, you will leave it with a sense of your Maradonas from your Messis. You'll know everything you need to know for your viewing pleasure when this tournament kicks off in 98 days' time. Um, but for those Americans who have lived these World Cups, I hope it reignites those deeply powerful memories. The World Cup is like nothing else in sports. The size of it, the scope of it. In the book, we describe it as an eclipse that strikes the entire planet for the 39 days of the tournament simultaneously. And if you haven't watched these World Cups, I hope you leave feeling as if you have. You've got all the backstory that you need to savor every second of what's about to come. Global electric connectivity, which is really what we all need right now, right?
Absolutely. And each of these chapters are structured around each World Cup, going back to Argentina in 1978. And in the introduction, you write that this is a book about feelings. So, how does this book go beyond just recounting the last 12 tournaments and instead use those moments to explore the emotional journey, both for you personally and for the fans who have lived them?
It's a really beautiful question. Um, I mean, the joy of the World Cup is that when two teams take the field, their nation's histories, their nation's politics, their nation's cultures take the field alongside them. So the storytelling, the memory making, it's epic. It really is a sporting event. When the Oakland A's play the Boston Red Sox, it's an incredible game of baseball, but you don't have that kind of multi-layered narrative. And knowing that 200 million people watch the Super Bowl, but 5 billion people watch the World Cup, you know that you're watching this really deep, almost like, I don't like to be hyperbolic, but Homer the Odyssey acting out in real time in the present day. You're watching it with the entire planet. So it makes that feeling of connectivity really, really profound. And the memory making, of moments good and bad, joyful and painful, is kind of etched in your brain and millions of other human beings' brains as it's lived out moment to moment. So it's the depth, the emotional memory making, the cross generational memory making. It's a story of how you connect to your mum, your dad, your grandparents, when you have them, your kids. It gives it just such a profound global sense of reality, but also a deeply personal one at the same time. And that's its magnificence.
Absolutely. And I want to go a little bit before the introduction of your book, too. And I promise things have been read beyond the introduction and the table of contents. But something that stood out to me was the quote that you included from Ian Darke's famous call of Landon Donovan's goal in the 2010 World Cup. And I won't dare do a dark impression of any kind, but the call did go something like, "Oh, can you believe this? Go, go, USA!" Certainly through, "Oh, it's incredible, and you cannot write a script like this." And so, obviously, for any diehard American soccer fan, including my producer Jeff, who is probably has goosebumps right now just hearing the words. But that goal against Algeria in the final moments that put America through to the knockout stage is still an all-time moment, and Ian Darke's call only made it greater. Why did it resonate so much with you that you felt it deserved a place at the beginning of your book?
There's two in the epigraph. There's two lines of poetry. Really, Ian Darke's lines were poetry. Anyone that lived them, 2010, um, just understands the sense of hope and dreams. Just how this goal, seconds were ticking away. The US were about to fail again. We love a winning team in America. Our women kick ass and take names. Our men are forever failing us. They've won just one game in history in a knockout round, one, which is astonishing. We're a great nation. We build things, we grow things, put a man on the moon. I always joke we invented the cronut. We've done everything in between. We've won one knockout game. It's astonishing. And so this was every 4 years you get the chance to build to create, to engage a bigger and bigger audience. And thankfully, football is the popularity, thanks to the Premier League in England, now surpasses what the US men do in terms of it being the driver for the growth of the game. But back then, it did feel they had to prove themselves to themselves and to us, and to be on the cusp of being eliminated in the group stage. It would have been a shattering moment. And instead, Landon Donovan scored an ecstatic team goal from one end of the field to the other in the blink of an eye. And soccer, instead of being laughed at for another 4 years as failure and a sport that's going nowhere in the US, suddenly it was on Sports Center. Suddenly there was just viral videos of bars across the United States exploding in relief and joy. And that's really the power of the moment. The other quote in the front of the book, in the epigraph, is from an incredible poet, a Uruguayan poet, Eduardo Galeano, who wrote, "Football is a pleasure that hurts." And so sandwiched between those, the joy of Ian Darke's call and Eduardo Galeano's very, very honest and truthful quote are really the two extremes of emotion that we all experience ultimately when we're watching this thing. Doom is around every corner.
I feel like you alluded to it a little bit there, but something from that call that, in my opinion, gets forgotten comes earlier in the play when he says, "Howard gratefully claims it in distribution, brilliant." And of course, he's talking about Tim Howard, who, after making a save, immediately gets the ball in his hands, threw it like Tom Brady to the midfield. Do you think that he gets enough credit for starting that incredible play?
Tim Howard, oh my lord, yes. I mean, the only reason Tim Howard gets less credit for that is that 4 years later, in Brazil, in that delirious World Cup, a World Cup that really cemented football's place. Right now, The Economist has just said that football is the third most popular sport in the United States. It's just supplanted baseball as the third. 2014 was really that turning point. One of the narratives in the book is about the rise of football in the United States, really between 1994, when the Men's World Cup was hosted here for the first time. I've just arrived in Chicago, so the first game was just a couple of blocks away at Soldier Field. And that was meant to make America overnight into a football-loving nation. It's taken a lot longer. And by the way, I'd argue we're all better for it. Like, if it had just turned America overnight, it would have been like a fad, a yo-yo or a pogo stick that would have come and gone like a hula hoop. Instead, every World Cup has grown a bigger and bigger, young, devoted, deeply knowledgeable, passionate audience across the United States. And Tim Howard, that 2014, the game against Belgium, which we could have won at the death and agonizingly missed a golden chance. But his record-breaking save after save after save, just night of human wonder. That's ultimately his moment, his spotlight, his magic. But everybody in that goal, from Tim Howard, Josie Altidore, my friend Clint Dempsey. When I painted the cover, had the cover painted for the front of the book, which is different Rodgers, a lot of Rodgers, probably too many Rodgers, but all the memories of different World Cups. And they said, who do you want to be wearing in the middle of it? And there was only one person, Clint Dempsey. That was the shirt he was wearing that 2014 night. They all got their joy. They all got their wonder. And we all owe them an incredible debt of thanks. It's on their shoulders that everything that's come to pass since then has occurred.
For sure. I want to use that as a segue to talk a little bit about the 2026 US men's team. And like you said, originally from Liverpool, but you've made it perfectly clear over the years and here that you stand with this US men's team. So how are you feeling about the team Mauricio Pochettino will likely put on the field in June?
We don't know. I always, when I do these interviews and I talk about we, there's always someone underneath me like, why is that guy saying we? But the honest truth is, number one, I am from Liverpool. Number two, many Liverpudlians don't cheer for the English national team. We feel like we that's a southern thing, and we're up north, and they don't care about us. So the opportunity to move here in 1994, right ahead of the World Cup, to see that US team. I'd never seen US footballers before, really. Took the field with a swagger, a stonewashed denim shirt, a lot of mullets. And they were so cocky and confident. It was really beautiful. I loved them the first time I saw them. And their rise which I honestly thought was just unstoppable. I did. I thought it was just a straight line rise. Unfortunately, it's been far more complicated than that. They didn't qualify in 2018, which was remarkable in so many levels, and they've been trying to recover since. This is the finest individual player for player squad that on the men's side our nation has ever been able to draw from. We have big players who play for big teams in big games in Europe. Um, and so there's a lot of expectation. The question is, we have no idea how they'll play as a collective. They've not had, because they're hosting, the chance to qualify. And in qualification, you find your identity, you find your rhythm, you find your sense of self. They've been playing friendlies, a bit like preseason NFL games. Can you really tell us how the New York Jets are going to do yeah, you can kind of tell, can't you? How they're going to, how the Chicago Bears, we don't know until they're in real hardened games. And so this team is really a question mark. And if Mauricio Pochettino, who is a smart man and is a culture builder, can harness the right players with the right idea of football and build the right culture, what it takes to go deep in a World Cup. These players live together, for 5.5 weeks, under a crucible of pressure with the nation watching. They will never be cheered on by more Americans than they will in 20. That's a new thing for them. The attendance at these things, the noise. Also, the storylines. Everyone's going to want to beat the United States. As I said earlier, when the two teams take the field, the nation's history, the nation's culture, the nation's politics take the field, everyone wants to beat us. And so it's going to be quite fascinating. I do believe in these guys. Your viewers may have heard of Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, a Texan, but just a ball of swagger, who's playing in Italy, some of the best football in his career. Tyler Adams, my friend from Wappingers Falls, New York. Chris Richards from Birmingham, Alabama, who is just having the time of his life in the Premier League. And I hope for them as individuals and a collective that they make us proud.
I want to talk a little bit about Christian Pulisic with you. Obviously, he's been a little banged up, but this is like all eyes are going to be on him this summer. And he's continued this amazing multi-year run with AC Milan and has fully cemented himself as being one of the top talents in European football. But my question for you is, do you think he's able to bring all that experience and growth and apply it to a U.S. team that is looking to take things to the next level?
It's a great question. We do not know. We have no idea. Look, Christian scored World Cup goals in the last World Cup. He was the gentleman who stepped up and crotched the ball in to get us out the group when we had to beat Iran. My Lord, how the world has changed in these 4 years when you think about that. So he can do it. Has skills that are very rare for a US men's national team player. In the early phase, we had good players who were good team players, good collective players. You spoke to coaches in Europe, they say the American player, they're good to have in a locker room. They're good guys. They never said they were great at football. We had goalkeepers, a wave of hand-eye coordination from basketball and baseball translating through to soccer, like a long biblical line of ball dudes. And then we've had the defenders and defensive midfielders, guys who break up play, who prevent the other team from scoring. Christian is the lead a creator in terms of men's football. You can argue whether he's the best that we've ever had. I think few argue that he's not the most innovative, most creative at his peak. But he needs to connect to the players. He's a player that needs to feel loved, that he needs to feel believed in, that he needs to feel trusted. And then he can do ecstatic, transcendent moments of wonder. And so, it's up to the coach to create that culture, to create that role for him. We don't even know where he's playing on the United States team right now. They keep moving him around. So it's both tactical, where do we play him? And then how can we make him feel loved so that he can really sing and soar and create those moments like the Landon Donovan 2010 moment that will be remembered forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to quickly hit on a few off the field storylines. I'd be remiss if we didn't. That's going to dominate this World Cup, both domestically and globally. There's no getting around the fact that the US is steeped in turmoil. But in my opinion, I feel like this can shake out one of two ways as it relates to the World Cup. So it's either going to magnify the issues and worsen due to the spotlight, or the opposite. So it does what it does. It unifies the world. Which scenario do you think the World Cup will have an effect on, in your opinion?
It's too early to tell, and nobody knows. Uh, the football doesn't exist in a vacuum. Football, ultimately, I've always said, I write about this in my book. One of the reasons I love football is that it is a mirror to the society that surrounds it. It tells us things. When we listen, it shows us things. We can hear everything in it. And I've always loved that. I've always found it so thrilling from when I first watched the World Cup in 1978. And I've learned that that's true even in times of challenge. Sometimes you look at the reflection and it shows and you do not like it. But we are so close to the outbreak of conflict. That is so uncertain. Think how far we've come just since last weekend. So I think FIFA are scrambling to try and keep up with the geopolitical realities. I think I'd say there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of challenges. Not just the conflict. Iran have qualified for the World Cup. It was amazing. Within 3 days of the outbreak of conflict, the Iranian Football Association put out a statement just saying we don't know if we're going to be able to play in the World Cup. It's become an ongoing issue where political leaders are already weighing in. There's an issue in Mexico in Guadalajara. There's a lot of talk about ICE, a lot of uncertainty about visas. So I'd say, speaking to a lot of European journalists, I'd file it right now under uncertainty and chaos. But I do know this, and this gives me hope. Football ultimately is about optimism. Sports is about optimism. I talked about the New York Jets earlier. Every single Jets fan is watching. You know that on the eve of the new season, how excited you are, how much you make yourself believe, you make the case. So sports is about reloadable optimism. And every single World Cup in the modern period, the drum roll going in 2010 South Africa, the fear mongering in the media, the discussion was not about the football going in. It was about the level of violence, a lot of carjacking, and every story is about how fans should not go, that it was not a World Cup that was safe to visit. It turned out to be the most ebullient of the modern period, the Mandela World Cup. 2014, I was caught up the year before in Brazil in riot after riot after riot. When they did the dry run for the World Cup, there were social and political protests outside of all the stadia. And again, there was conversation like, should it be moved from Brazil? Brazil wanted, the people of Brazil wanted social services and education, not football stadia. And it turned out to be one of the greatest parties the World Cup's ever seen. So in my heart, I agree there's two scenarios, and I pray that, as in World Cups past, once that ball is kicked, once Lionel Messi takes the field, that the emotional kicks in. And the cliche about the World Cup is it stops wars, and there is truth in that. And we feel that sense of positive, electric global connectivity that is in desperately short supply right now.
Yeah, I think that was a really beautiful answer. I think you did great explaining that. But I have two more questions for
Sure.
you before we let you go. We could have a whole separate conversation talking about the rest of the World Cup field. But if you could take your life savings and put it on a team to win it all right now, who are you putting on?
I gotta say the USA, right? Just contractually, legally. Otherwise my citizenship may get revoked. So that's who I hope and I pray for, just for the growth of the game. The US team have for so long been we love a dream team. The US men have been a dream on team. And so that would be I'd honestly love them to win 2 knockout games, make us proud, leave at least with a sense of valiant progress. The big teams, if you are a forecaster, you can't ignore Spain, one of the most talented squads, deepest squads of all time, ecstatically talented. France, almost similar. And I guess I can tell you who won't win, which is England, because England always raises the nation's hopes. They're actually very, very, very good at football, but they do try and create ever more dramatic ways to shatter the nation's hearts.
All right, I want to end on going into chapter 5 of your book, the 1994 World Cup in the United States, which you mentioned earlier. It's a really poignant chapter about you finding your way in America after moving here, and it's also about America finding its way through international football. And at the time, I will admit I was only 2 when that happened, but I've heard the stories and I've seen the images of the Rose Bowl packed with 94,000 people for that final. But talk about writing that chapter and experiencing that World Cup and what it meant for your personal journey covering football.
It's very profound to think about. I find it very emotional just hearing you talk about it. 1994, right before I just moved to Chicago. Everything that I loved and wanted was here. The Bears were here. It felt like a John Hughes movie. The music of Public Enemy and Tracy Chapman was everywhere. And the one thing that was not here was football. It didn't just not exist. Americans actively hated it. And right before the World Cup, I write about this in the book. There was a study done where they discovered soccer was the United States' 67th most favorite sport, and tractor pulling was number 66. So I think about the journey since, to be honest. The World Cup was meant to make America love football. It was more like a circus that came and left. It was still the best attended World Cup ever. Americans love a circus. They love to daytime drink and have an excuse to do it. Football, the World Cup was that. But what I recognized was every single World Cup, the audience got bigger and bigger and bigger with each one, like a wave leaving flotsam and jetsam back on the beach. And so 2026, this World Cup coming back now, is almost going to finish the job that 1994 started, make us an inextricable football-loving nation like the rest of the world. And it's that journey that I've tried to write about in the book. It's that journey that I've lived as like a tiny surfer on a massive wave. And the world is coming. The world is coming to the United States this summer. I was in Houston last night with JJ Watt live on stage and Hakeem Olajuwon, talking about how the World Cup will transform Houston, will make Houston a globally revered city, a globally known city. It's probably one of the best kept secrets of the 11 United States host cities. So to think about the memories that are going to be made by so many millions of young Americans watching this, to think about how the cities who are hosting, please God, will be transformed in the most joyous way. Think about the millions of foreign travelers. I think New York's expecting GDP of $5 billion coming in, 20,000 new jobs just because of the World Cup. So I think about all of that. It's dizzying, it's ecstatic, and I just love the US to win one World Cup on the men's side in my lifetime. I don't ask for much.